Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Elevation Association podcast, Experience Podcast. One of these days I'll get it right. It's only our own podcast, you know. Ti- Talking in titles are hard. Uh, so we are your hosts, Dr. Jared Hill, Dr. Dan Nelson, and we're excited to be continuing to discuss building the building blocks of a good practice. So we are coming hot off the heels of talking about knowing when you're ready to add an associate. And along those same ideas of building a practice, we wanted to talk today about the purpose-built practice. So we're going to break this up into three parts. So this is part one of this three-part purpose-built practice discussion. And yeah, man, I'm excited to get rolling into this, Jared.
Yeah, this is a fun topic. I think it's one that a lot of dentists think about a lot, and a lot of times we really run before we should, or before we learn how to really walk. And the problem is we have some success, and then we get ourselves into some debt, and then we have a lifestyle that we have to maintain, and we got to back up a little bit. So I like kind of this, how to, we're talking about today about building the foundation and your why, and looking forward to kind of diving deep into this topic.
Yeah. I think most dentists don't fail or struggle because they lack ambition or intelligence or even capability. And a lot of times they're awesome clinicians. I think that they struggle or they fail because they chase growth before they built a good foundation. I should give it some background to where these episodes are coming from. I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Eric Russell in Utah. He and I were chatting this last week, and we were talking about you know, some things that we were doing at our practice. We were comparing notes on what's helped to grow certain aspects of our practice, and we'll come back to this discussion in part three of this podcast. But it really got me thinking about, gosh, how can we build a practice with purpose, not just let it just grow. We talk about organic growth, but getting a practice to grow does take purpose. And sometimes we fail to get our ducks in a row, and we just let things start happening. Right. So, and sometimes the danger is like, chasing marketing or new tech or, just growing, for no reason. And one of the things that Eric said that he really liked, he says, yeah, Jared's always saying, that growth for growth's sake is the, give me that quote, Jared. I'm just going to mess it up.
Growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell.
The ideology of a cancer cell. And I love that, and so he's like, man, he's like, we've been awesome. We've been growing, but I really want to not just grow for growth's sake. And so, that really is the impetus to the kickoff for this. So shout out to Eric. Thanks for the inspiration. But yeah, I think before we ever talk about growth targets, we need to talk about foundation first.
Yeah, and this reminds me, when I was a young dentist, I was an associate, and then I bought a practice. And when you're young and you buy a practice, your focus is on your clinical skills. Generally speaking, you're still trying to develop, you're chasing, the next procedure, the next thing you can add, and a lot of your focus is on that. So you're oftentimes adopting the culture or the vision of the previous owner and the previous staff because it was successful and that's what you bought. And so a lot of times we get stuck in that. But I had after a couple of years of buying a practice, I had a mentor, a good friend of ours, a member of the Elevation Association, Dr. Buck True, who presented at our last conference in Nicaragua. He taught me just a very simple saying. He said, sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. And that hit me hard. And that's essentially what we're talking about here is we often want to just put our gas pedal down and go forward as fast as we can. But we get ahead of ourselves a lot. And when you try to build upon that weak foundation, kind of going into this next section, foundation. I mean, trying to build upon that weak foundation, it's just it's hard to maintain, and it's going to start to crumble. So, um, the growth that you have or want to have, it needs to sit on structure, right? It can't sit on hustle, or it can't sit on pace. It can't sit on desires. It's got to sit on a structure, a very firm foundation, and it's order to define what that structure is, what that means.
Yeah, and we see this all the time, where the analogy I like to use is you have a doc. We have a doc that comes to us and is like, "Hey, I want to start growing. I really want to grow my implant practice. I want to grow the implant part of my practice, and they have all these ideas of how to build this implant part of their practice, but to me, that's like, but you'll ask, okay, well, what are your core values? Do you have your vision traction organizer complete? Are you optimized? Are you using data? Like, what do you have to do this stuff? Oh, no, I don't know. I don't know, and so to me, it's analogous to someone that doesn't have a foundation is so focused on the dormer window. They don't even have a foundation yet, but they're focused on like, I got to get this dormer window right. And okay, that's fine. At some point, that's going to be a part of the structure, but you haven't even focused on the basics and getting the foundation set and solid. And so you're going to focus all the time on this one thing. And the other thing that happens is we see is that someone will not have their structure, their foundational structure done. And then they go and hire a marketing company to market towards implants or whatever, or new patients even. And then it comes back as like, yeah, I'm so frustrated with this marketing company. And to be fair, there's some marketing companies that are better than others, but the point is that they don't have anything to offer the marketing company. They don't have anything to give the marketing company to take to market. And so the marketing company struggles to find ways to like, okay, I'm trying to grow, this cosmetic side of your practice or whatever, but they don't have the toolkit. They're just using the same generic crap that they use for every office out there. And so now you don't have any differentiators. You don't have anything to really, make yourself show that you're unique or special. Well, of course it's going to struggle, right? Like, and so again, it's focusing on the wrong thing. You don't have the foundation set to give the proper vision and cool things about your practice to a marketing company to then offer to the public. So yeah, we see this all the time.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't want us to sound like we're anti-growth, because we're absolutely pro-growth. We just bought another practice, you and I, Dan. Like we're all about growth, but we're also really focusing today on getting ready for that growth. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. And what we're talking about is, before you even set those growth targets, you got to organize your practice. You got to make sure everything is in order, right? You got to make sure your systems are in order, make sure your VTO, your vision traction organ, make sure all that is in order. And then you grow, because if you don't have those things set, and you start to grow and you just go full into this growth mode, it creates chaos. It creates chaos amongst all the staff, amongst you, it creates tension, and the chaos is going to suck or drain all of your energy that you have, and you're going to be focusing your time and your effort putting out fires. You're gonna lead to burnout. Your staff is gonna burn out. Your team members are gonna burn out. They're gonna be like, we're trying to do this, but we haven't even got X put together, right? So, and it's impossible to know where you're growing or where you're at in growth. It's impossible to use data, because now your numbers are unreliable if you haven't set that foundation. If you haven't cleaned up your data, if you haven't had a system for entering your data, analyzing your data, if you start to look at data now in a chaotic system, it's going to be unreliable, and you're going to be frustrated.
Yeah. Another probably dumbed down analogy that everybody, can appreciate and probably already, has something similar in their head that you and I were just talking about. I'm training for a high rocks right now. My daughter did one with her boyfriend. It looked really fun. And I'm like, dang, that gives me some purpose, right? Like, so now I know my why of why I'm going to the gym and I've got some purpose. And so I'm starting to build myself up. I'm purposely building up my physique and my cardio, to go and do one of these things. But it was funny because I got a little cocky when we were at the High Rocks event in California watching my daughter do this. I'm like, it's like, I could probably roll up right now and do this. I was like, let me in, coach. I was ready to go. And like, so I was like, all right, I'm going to go home and start training. I did half of one as my first training session and I almost died. And it took me an hour and a half. And I seriously, like, in between sets, I was like gasping for, I was redlining. And, if I were to roll up unprepared with no foundation, with no preparation and just try to hammer out one of those high rocks, I'd probably die, And so, and that's kind of the same feeling that you get if you think about it. Like, if we're not prepared, if we don't prepare our practice and we're not laying a good foundation for operations to occur, when we hit the ground running, like, we get gassed out, like you were saying, like, it creates chaos. We're too tired, we're too burnt out, we're too whatever to perform at a level that we need to be running our practice. So maybe kind of a dumbed down, overly simplistic comparison, but I really think it holds true. So yeah, I mean, I think I think if you don't have a good foundation, like you're saying, you end up having a fragile practice, right? Um,
Yeah, if first of all, I thought that example was perfect. You're ambitious, you want to go for something. I think that's an awesome goal, and I think you should do it. But you need to get a baseline of where you're at. You need to figure out where you're at, right? So that and oftentimes we just want to go and we just want to enter the competition and go and do it, right? But I'm just going to go place implant or whatever it is, right? Um, but you really need to slow down. Oh, whoa, hold on a second. Let's see where we're at. Let's get a plan and move forward. Practically speaking, in a dental office, in the offices that we've worked with and that we've seen have issues with this, let me just give you just a couple examples. One, there's no clear roles amongst the team, right? So everybody's in charge of sterilization, everybody's in charge of collections, everybody's in charge of this, everybody's in charge of that, right? Everyone's in charge of turning over the room. Everyone's in charge of treatment plan. This is when there's no clear roles, growth is impossible. It's going to be so frustrating for your team and your staff. People who don't have a meeting cadence, meaning if you have an occasional meeting here and there, or yeah, we're supposed to have one every week, or we're supposed to have one every month, forget it. Like, growth, if without those meetings where you're able to sit down and review everything and address all the issues, if you don't have that meeting cadence of consistent meetings, again, that's an example of where you're gonna fail. People who don't have a scorecard, meaning if you don't know your data, if you don't know where you're at on a weekly basis, quarterly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, you're gonna spend a lot of money, and it's gonna be frustrating because you're not gonna be able to really accurately measure whether this path you're taking is working or not. And then, and along that meeting cadence, I guess the last example I want to give is we see a lot of people who don't have clarity on their priorities.
mm,
So they jump in on something. For example, some people may want to do. I feel like I need to institute a bonus system. Well, why? I mean, what is the priority here? What are you working towards? Well, I just feel other people are doing it. I feel like I need to do it. My staff is asking for one. You know, is it a priority? Let's sit down and talk about that. So if those are just like some practical clinical examples that if you're not doing those things, stop, slow down, get those things in order, because you can't scale effort. Like, you're putting a lot of effort, teams putting effort. You can scale structure. That's different. You can't scale effort, but you can scale structure. So it's important to have that structure in place in order to be able to grow in the way that you want to grow.
absolutely. I'm trying to think I'm pulling a blank on the comedian's name that says, he's talking about having your third kid. And he's like, people ask me what it's like to have a third kid. And he says, well, imagine you're drowning and someone hands you a baby.
Jim Gaffigan, right?
Gaffigan. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I love that because a lot of times I think that's how it feels in a practice. If you're not, if you don't have these things that you talked about roles and scorecards and clarity on priorities and all that stuff, is exactly what it turns into. you, you just you feel like you're already drowning, and then someone hands you a baby, right? So yeah, it's so hard. Yeah. So
Yeah.
um, I we've talked about this already. We've hit on this, and it's this concept of the why, right? I love talking about the why. Matt Mulcock loves to talk about the why, right? He says before you make a financial decision, what's your why? So, the when we brought this practice, the idea of buying a second practice, we would say, hey, well, Matt, what do you think about this? He says, well, why? What's your why behind it, right? And I think that that's actually become a question that I ask before I make any big decisions is my why. What's it do? Is it really feeding me in a good way? Is it doing something that is beneficial to me in some way? And I've trickled that down to even like, um, kind of maybe sillier, decisions and certainly based on anything that costs over, that has 4 digits or more is I have to go, is this a why? But also like where I spend my time and that kind of thing. So when you're talking about, big decisions or drivers in your life, the why is huge. Why are we even doing this? What's the purpose for this growth or maybe you're getting smaller or whatever, but it's so important to know your why. And I really think that the owner's clarity determines the ceiling of the practice, right? So if you can get your why to be clear, um, and really be able to articulate that well, that's going to add so much direction for the practice, right? And I think you can build that a couple ways. I think you have to, answer a couple questions. We get. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was talking to Eric. We get a little disillusioned over time. I think that the grind wears us out a little bit, and we forget why we went into dentistry to begin with, and I think that that can be a good why of like, well, why did I want to do this to begin with? And I get it. It's not always as sexy as it seems from the outside. And once you get into it, maybe it's not as attractive. I always use the example of the fighter pilots that I was around when I was in the Air Force and the flying part is definitely sexy and it's definitely awesome, but there's all the other stuff that comes with it, that maybe isn't as sexy, the administration work, all the paperwork, some of the meetings, and so when you peel the curtain back, it's not as maybe as awesome as you thought it was going to be, but still that was that motivation. There was something within us that when we wanted to go into dentistry, and I think that is good to tap into when we're trying to determine our why.
Yeah, and as you're thinking about your why, why am I doing this? The next transition is, does my practice reflect my why? Right?
Yeah.
Why does my practice exist? And I had a hard time with this as I was trying to determine my why. Why? It's kind of a buzzword. Simon Sinek has a book, Know Your Why. And it was for me. Well, what was really helpful for me to determine my why was to talk this out with other dentists who were willing to kind of be open and really discuss this without bravado, right? And so oftentimes at our retreats in Nicaragua this year in Dominica, I'm looking forward to talking with Dennis. Why does your practice exist? What do you do? Why are you doing this? But these are great questions to one ask yourself, and if you're struggling, talk with somebody else and see what there's and you may be the same reason, it may not be the same reason, but it may spark some thoughts. And I would encourage those conversations because that's what helped me. I had a hard time coming up with this just on my own. I knew why I went into dentistry, and that actually was superficial at first. It was for me the why was because I saw a couple of men examples that I wanted to be like. I wanted to maybe have some of the things that they had, I felt like it was a stable profession, those things that I felt like that wasn't a good enough reason. Once I got into the profession, I had my own practice. I really had to dig deep into why does my practice exist, and does it serve then my why? I mean, and so these are great deep questions that are worth the conversation, because as the owner, if you don't know why your practice exists, if you can't articulate why your practice exists, your team is spinning their wheels, right? They will define their own why. They will have a reason why they come to work. They will have a reason why they clock in. They will have a reason why they help you treatment plan the way they do or schedule you the way they do. Right? They will come up with a why as well, unless you articulate this. Why do we exist? Here's what we're trying to achieve. This is why you come to work at Wood River Dental Care. This is our purpose. This is our cause. This is our passion. Define those, all those. What is your purpose? What is your cause? What is your passion? Right. Um, and make sure that everybody's on board with all of those things as you are trying to define this why, to get everybody on the same foundation, that same level, so you can build off of that. So you're not building off of different separate foundations and trying to make one cohesive structure off of these different ideas and thoughts about that.
Yeah, we don't want to throw everybody into an existential crisis right now and be like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, because your why of why you went into dentistry and your why of why your practice exists now, I'm sure it's changed, right? Like it's not the same reason, like you were just saying, but you should still have a good understanding of the why, right? And I think that a good way to audit this and to check your VTO, so is to go into your, in the part of your vision traction organizer that you have your purpose, cause, and passion. Measure that against your why. Does your why align with the purpose, cause, and passion on your VTO? And if the why in your head is different than the why on your purpose, cause, and passion, it's probably time to rethink that and really check and see, okay, uh, am I aligned right now? Because sometimes when we make when we're creating our VTO, um, life does change. Things, happen to where now we maybe are not aligned, even with our own vision traction organizer. So I think knowing your why is such a good audit tool to go through so many aspects of your life and your practice to go, okay, am I aligned right now? Do I need to change some things? Do I need to get things to where I'm I'm shooting where I'm aiming, So and I think a good example is there's a tendency to get superficial on this, I think, as well. Just this idea and thought that everything is more simple than maybe it should be, right? So let me give you an example. So if your purpose, your cause, and passion, if your why is we fix teeth, versus we change lives through fill in the blank, right? And so, and that sounds maybe a little bit corny or cheesy, but I really think there is a difference there, and the way that you approach it. And I'm not saying everybody should have this as their why, but I think that there's some things that you can ask yourself to kind of figure this out. And it's like, well, when did dentistry feel the most meaningful for you? What problem or problems do you love to solve or love solving? uh, another way to see your impact and maybe the why from a different perspective is to go through your Google reviews and go and you can actually run them against. We had Dr. Jones was doing this at our outfitter course this last weekend. I love this. He took his Google reviews and ran them into Chat GPT to find out what his patients um, appreciated and what they liked. What did they thank him for to see if it was aligned with his vision. So was he executing his vision well? And I really like that idea. These are some ways to make sure, like, oh, what is my why? Am I hitting my target? Is my why aligned with my vision? And a couple of nice tools to see, I guess, audit that part as well.
Yeah, I want to comment here too, as far as one of the reasons why you set your why is because you don't want to go 10 or 15 years with this nebulous idea of why you're in dentistry. and then realize you're going down the wrong path. This isn't really why you wanted to do this. You if you articulate your why and you set it and you set your 10-year vision, this is what Wood River Dental Care is achieving, striving towards. And you get a year into this and you're like, this is actually not what I like. This is not what I was looking for. And it's okay. That's okay. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. And you can change your why. People feel like, oh, I don't want to get stuck in a 10-year plan. You're never stuck. You can always go back and revise it and change it. And I think that's part of the process that people get stuck in. It's like, oh, but once you define it, then you can, we'll talk about this later in future episodes, but once you define it, then you start to break it down how you're going to work towards that and achieve that. And that was maybe when it starts to feel like, oh man, maybe this isn't my real why. Whereas if you had never defined it, you're just kind of always working towards this. I want to obtain practices. I want to build, and I want to do 10x. I want to own 10 practices immediately. And you may go down this path and you may invest quite a bit of time and money into an effort that may not be the return that you want. And so that is why it's important to define it, work towards it, analyze it as you're going along. And if it feels off or don't continue to build on something that's shaky, right? You're like, stop. And it's okay. So I guess it's slow down in order to speed up in the right direction. And I think that's okay. And I think people get stuck on that. And I just wanted to voice my opinion on that you're never stuck. It's a refining process is what it is. So I guarantee, I can almost guarantee you're probably going to change your VTO. It's probably going to look one way, probably going to be very ambitious. And then as life changes, situations change, kids come in, kids go out, whatever it is, you may think, man, this isn't actually the direction that I want to go. And it's important to articulate that and continue to refine that.
Dude, I'm so glad you brought that up because as you're talking about that, I was just thinking. So we had James Heaton from Smile Trend come out to Nicaragua last year. He was at our international summit and gave a killer presentation. Him and Michael Allen. It's actually a webinar you guys can go and watch if you're interested in this. But he is like the prime example of what you were just talking about. He gave such a good story about he was really resenting being a dentist. He hated it. He didn't like being a general dentist, and he thought he was going to go and explore maybe some specialty options, and started doing some of that, and found he didn't like that either. And so it wasn't until he really got rolling in cosmetics and doing cosmetic dentistry that he found his why. He had to pivot hard and adjust. I mean, he already had a practice. He was deeply, literally invested, monetarily invested, never mind his time and energy into his practice. And he had to do an about face. And so what he did was he started taking as many cosmetic courses as he could. He just loaded up and took as many CE classes as he could. He just found that he really loved it, and he got regrounded through this passion of doing cosmetic dentistry. And his why was so clear, so much so that he and Michael started Smile Trend. It doesn't get more clear than that and communicate it to a team than that, right? Like, so they literally, when you walk into his office, he has two parts of his office. He has the general dentistry part, and then there's a separate entrance to his cosmetic studio. And it's such a cool execution and a great story of exactly what you were talking about. But it's not easy to make that pivot, and I think if you're on the outside looking in and going, oh, well, yeah, look at James and everything he's accomplished. I want to be that guy. Well, that didn't come without a lot of like sleepless nights, frustration, burnout. He was really at a hard axis in his life where he had to pivot and make the changes to pursue or to find and pursue his why. So the why is so important. And now if you talk to James, he freaking loves what he does. He'll talk to you and you can feel the passion behind what he's doing now. And he genuinely loves, and he's very successful because he's so passionate. That's one of the drivers for his success. So yeah, that's such a good point, Jared. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it was interesting too with James, and James and Michael are awesome. Love them, love what they're doing at Smile Trend. As James started, he was all in on, like you said, on Invisalign. Like he was going to be, he set that vision. All right, we're going to be an Invisalign practice. I'm going to take all the Invisalign courses. We're going to set us up, and he did that for about a year and a half, and was like, this isn't it, right? Like, and I think that's okay. Yes, he invested time and money into it, but he didn't spend 10 years trying to build this thing and struggle and hang on to this. He moved on to the next thing, which I think the next thing was endo. I think he spent a lot of time. All right, well, and then like you said, and then he found it, right? He found the vision, his why. Why do I want to do this? I really love doing this. And when you find that, it blossoms like it has blossomed for them. There's a really great quote. I follow this guy on social media. His name is Corey Muscara, and he said, if the only reason you're staying is fear of losing something, then you're living off of the scraps of life. So the only reason why you're holding on to this because you're afraid of, I spent 2 years invested in this. That's not worth it, right? Then this is exactly what we're talking about. You really got to define your why. And here's a few prompts for you guys as you're thinking about your why. How am I going to define this? Well, when did dentistry feel most meaningful for you? Right? What were you doing? What was your practice like? Where were you? Where were you in your phase of life? Like, when were you like, this is meaningful? Another prompt is, what problems do you love solving? Right? Do you love solving the oral surgery problems? Do you love solving the business admin problems? What problems within the scope of dentistry do you love solving? And then what do, like Dan said, look at your Google reviews, or have chat analyze your Google reviews, and ask yourself those questions. What do patients thank you for? That's a good indicator of, we're good at this, and this and it's reflected in the feedback from your patients. So ask yourself those questions, and it because if your only why is production, money, to make sure you're growing, then burnout is inevitable. I guarantee that.
Yeah, we see it all the time. We were just talking with one of our members last week. He sent us a text and said, "I'm burning out, guys. I need something. I'm burning out." And he's like, "I hope that your summit in Dominica is talking about burnout because I need something to get to fire me up, right?" And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this is a big part of this, and to kind of wrap this first part of the podcast up, I want to have you guys do an exercise, and this will really be a quick check to see do you know your why. So finish the sentence. Pretty easy. Just um, our practice exists to fill in the blank. So if you can answer that question quick, and clearly and concisely, you probably have a good vision. You probably have your why figured out, but you should be able to answer that. And we're going to get into that question, and why it's important that you can answer it, and also why your team members should be able to answer that quickly as well. Because if you as the leader, if you're not clear, your team will never be clear. So we're going to talk about that next time. And yeah, if you guys have any questions on this, let's keep this conversation rolling. We'd love to chat about this stuff. Like I said, this was, when Dr. Russell and I were chatting, it was 8 o'clock at night. We just, threw down a phone call. He was getting done with some baseball practice, and we just were talking about this. So give us a call, drop us an email, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, check out elevationassociation.com. You can contact us through that. We love talking dentistry. We love talking the business aspect, the leadership, life, all of it. So yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to chat.
Yep. Find us on school, come to our summits, whatever it takes. Just you don't have to go about this on your own, right? Let's team up, collaborate, And we're an open book, happy to share thoughts, risks, failures, successes, all those things, and just for the betterment of each other. So, thanks, everyone. Looking forward to next week, Stan.
All right, cool. Let's do it. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers.